Welcome back to Beer with Nat. On every episode, I share a beer and a chat with people who do what they love for a living. They work in the beer industry. Today's guest is Francesca Slattery, Overseas Manager for the 5 Points Brewing Company. Francesca has been a part of the 5 Points team since 2016. She got her start at the brewery here in London, but when her personal circumstances changed and she relocated to Dublin, she brought the job with her. For anyone wanting to know how to break into the beer industry, this is the episode for you. You'll hear all about Francesca's resolution to have a career in beer by the end of the year and how she made it happen, how her role has changed over the years, including how she made the transition from London to Dublin with 5 Points, and of course, what she enjoys most about being a part of the beer industry. Here she is. Oh, that's such a nice sound.
I have brought you the 5 Points Brewing Company's Brickfield Brown. I brought it because obviously I was really proud to be able to bring something of my own brewery. And specifically the brown is something that's got a very special place in my heart because I genuinely think it's probably one of the best examples of an English brown ale that is available out there. And I did not like brown ales until I tried this.
Okay.
I had always found them way too sweet and cloying. And then we decided 2 sort of autumns ago, I think it was 2016, that we were going to try a brown, get it out there and see whether or not people would like it, because it's quite an unfashionable, old school style. A lot of people were drinking milds and browns back in the 60s and 70s, and I think it got forgotten and neglected as a very, obviously, British style and a very gorgeous style, actually, when it's done well. And so ours, I think, with its 6 different malts, it's just one very clean sort of hop, and also the use of oats is that lovely balance between sweetness and but also not too cloying. And I just love it. Basically, let's get started on it. Cheers. Or sláinte, as we say in Ireland.
Yes.
Yum.
I love this beer as well. It's just got that lovely roast character to it, but it's so gentle. And like you said, there's enough sweetness, but enough bitterness for balance that, you just are ready to go back for another sip.
It's just so silky and kind of indulgent without being cloying, and it's obviously not too strong either, because a brown ale, it's not like an imperial brown ale, it's just 5.4%.
Yeah.
And, usually as well, it goes with tons of food, both sweet and savoury. So I recommend people to go out and rediscover their love for brown, or just go and discover brown ales, because I want to make brown ale sexy again, basically, because they are
we
sexy.
Need to bring them back. They're so good.
Yeah,
I know. I
absolutely.
wrote a blog post on it earlier this year, being like, where are the brown ales? We need more brown ales.
Yeah, so Brickfield Brown is hopefully going to be leading the charge for that.
The one to bring it back.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, you're clearly very proud of 5 Points, the brewery that you work for. So you are now the overseas manager for 5 Points Brewing Company, but you're not based in London like the rest of the brewery is. You are in Dublin, which is where you are hosting me today. Thank you very much. So I'd love to hear about the ins and outs of your current job, and then we will talk about how you got to the role that you're in today, and your transition from London to Dublin. So what is the day-to-day like of an overseas manager?
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, I really pitched for it to be called overseas manager because I just thought it sounded a bit more glamorous than export manager.
Yeah, okay. I was wondering that. I was like, is she export or overseas? Okay.
Yeah. But also, as you've pointed out, I also myself am based overseas, so I thought it was very appropriate to be called the overseas manager. So this is a really new role. It's completely new for the brewery, and it's very new for me. I've only been doing it a couple of months, so just trying to find my way through. So my kind of course, as it makes sense when we talk about export, my role is to increase our export market. We have been doing a little bit of exporting in the past, which had looked after itself quite well and had formed through good relationships, good distributors. And then my personal circumstances brought me here to Ireland. And so I kind of thought to myself, don't really want to leave the brewery. I liked the idea of maybe being able to bring the beer to a new market, because we for ages have always said no to exporting in terms of our capacity.
Okay.
The last thing you want to do, any brewer wants to do, I'm sure any business wants to do, is to say yes to something when it's international, and then all those people who've been buying your beer locally for all that time and been supporting you for years, you turn around and say, no, you can't have that beer that you've been ordering every week or even just on a regular basis.
You've helped us build the business, and now we're going to give the product to someone else.
Exactly. So I think, that was something that we really were very cautious to manage within 5 Points. Our growth has been rapid, but also it's been managed in stages. So I think in terms of exporting, that's why it wasn't on the agenda. We just did a little bit that kind of we were able to satisfy and to look after. So it was already a good time for 5 Points because we are now at capacity to be able to export the beers. And obviously you need someone to look after that. It's, you know, you kind of, the relationship we've had with Italy, which has been a long-term relationship, we've kept on top of, and it has been managed, but it has been sort of quite, once you're in, it was quite easy. Whereas obviously exporting is quite a big thing to think about. There's all different countries, there's all different rules, there's different needs of the market, and you need to know what those needs are. So my day-to-day is, as it stands, has been doing a lot of research because, you know, you don't want to go into anything blind. Been talking to a lot of people who've done exporting previously, are doing it currently within the beer world, who've been very helpful. I've been talking to a lot of people in their markets and asking, you know, what are the needs of the market? I don't want to, there's no benefit to anyone if I'm trying to sell a beer to someone where it's not going to work for them and therefore it's not going to work for me. So that's been a really big focus of mine, that it's the same, you know, from... If you're going to sell to a pub in London, there's no point selling them a product that they don't think they can sell to their locals. So my day-to-day has been a lot of research, a lot of trying to learn the local language of a place and at least starting a phone conversation in their language.
Wow, that's impressive.
And then trying to say, but do you speak English, in their language, and then being utterly relieved when they say yes. And just having conversations with distributors and bars and stuff, because you need to kind of get into the actual market and hear from those people. The other thing I've done actually, which is very helpful, is there's, you know, the Department for International Trade in the UK's job is to support local businesses who are looking to grow their markets abroad, and they've been very helpful when they've got advisors in different countries, and I've been getting amazing overviews from them. And I think it's quite good to also talk to people that are outside of the beer industry and talk a bit more high level generally about kind of how things are received, how British goods are received, both physically and also just by the population, and where the current markets are and trends. So it's been a big change from what I was doing previously at 5 Points, but it's worked really well for us, and hopefully it's going to continue to work for us as a business.
Yeah, so when you first came here to Dublin, you were the Ireland account manager.
Yeah, so I think, that's what I kind of pitched. I was like, I'd previously been looking after the London accounts, and when I sort of knew that it was my partner's job that brought us to Dublin, and I sort of knew that therefore I was kind of keen to come with him. So, and I knew what that meant in terms of the impact on 5 Points. And I just went to Ed, who's the founder and owner of 5 Points, and I said, I've got some news. I'm moving to Dublin. And he was like, no. And I was like, but also I'm happy for you, but no. And I was like, I know. And I said, well, how about I take the beer with me? And what do you reckon? And I will be boots on the ground living there in a country which, you know, will be easy to access in regards that it's not far away, that we speak the same language. And then how often would, ever a brewery of our size be able to ever have someone living there? You know,
and had you had any presence in Ireland previously with the beer? So
No.
This was all new. This was you saying, I work for you here in London. I'm going to Ireland.
Yes.
Can I bring my job and the beer with me?
Exactly.
And this was a whole new market for 5 Points to enter.
Exactly. So it was a risk. It was okay, let's try it. I kind of, you know, I did research. I spoke to a lot of people here, which I didn't know anyone here before I moved here, but I'm very good at contacting people and getting stuck in. I got lots of contacts in the UK who've been able to give me contacts over in Ireland, from beer distributors to just publicans and people and drinkers, you know, kind of. It was really good. I did a lot of research, and I thought we could give it a go. And as I say, the unique opportunity to have me to be able to sort of launch the brand with boots on the ground. I mean, for that first year, I said to Ed, you know, and he agreed, which was wonderful. Like, how about let's give it a go? Let's see if it works. Let's review it after 6 months, see what our progress has been, and then my idea was that hopefully if it did prove that it could work here in Ireland, then potentially the role could grow to look after wider markets. And whilst I can't live in all those markets, that was kind of the goal. And it matched what 5 Points was looking for in terms of they were going to be ready to do a bit more exporting around this time. So it was quite good timing, but I think I probably propelled it a little bit faster because of my personal circumstances. And we did that, and I was pretty busy the first year being the Ireland account manager. I did 50 events.
Running around,
on my own, which was quite, and also on my own, so not having the kind of, we definitely had brewers come and visit and come over for significant events, but it was just a lot of getting out there, meeting people, talking to them.
Throwing yourself and the beers into this new market.
Absolutely.
Totally untapped.
Absolutely, which was really, I learned a lot very fast, and I've made a lot of contacts, because when you go out and just meet people and you bump into them, you just you work in beer. Oh, so do I. And then you just start talking. So
fast friends.
Exactly. So then, so that's why it's evolved now into a general overseas role, because it's worked well in Ireland.
That was the trajectory.
Yep. And now we're ready to go with a wider market.
And what other markets do you oversee now?
So now I'm still looking after Ireland, and also increasing our presence and working on Italy, because it's much easier to develop something that you've already started than it is to start from scratch. And because it is such a new role, mostly what I've been doing is I've got lots and lots of things on the cusp. I've got loads and loads of like things that are in the mix, and I could tell you probably a list of about a dozen countries where I've got varying degrees of levels, and both within Europe and then further afield, because obviously they all have different challenges in terms of you have to make big decisions about, do I want the beer to go all the way over here, or do we want it to go to this particular market? So I've been really trying to cultivate a kind of nice mix of opportunities for us where I think the beer will do well, where I think it will be well received. I think also there's different sort of levels of, somewhere there's craft beer has really proven itself and it probably would be quite easy to slide in there, and then there's some more like niche markets where it's growing, and Croatia's a place that just keeps coming up a lot in conversations about, there's actually a real love and desire for craft beer in Croatia, but there's not.
I just thought everyone was going there on holiday.
Well, they probably do, and then think, hang on, I would like some beer.
Yeah, exactly.
But they don't actually have a lot of brewers there yet, so there's a lot of reception for international beers in somewhere like Croatia, for example. Whereas I know that the Spanish craft beer movement has really propelled forward and really excelled, and just it's running away from itself. And so there's actually a lot of love and desire for Spanish craft beers, but there's still a lot of room for internationals like myself. So it's that kind of balance between making sure that you're going somewhere where the local market is going to need you. So if we did this in a year's time, hopefully my answer to that question would be, we're in this place, this place, this place, this place.
Exactly.
But it's all still in the mix and working at the moment.
Yeah, we'll have to come back, do a follow-up, and see where you've gotten the beer.
Hopefully, yes.
But it's, where can you find the right distributor relationships? Where will the beer arrive in a good condition, quality-wise, things like that. So there seem to be a lot of considerations.
The logistics is something that I didn't have to think about as much when I was looking after London, because we deliver the beer ourselves, and we've got a whole logistics team, and I'm obviously still working very closely with the logistics team, because those guys are still the ones who have to put the pallets together and fill in the paperwork and everything. But obviously I now have to be very mindful of logistics, which is a whole new little string to my bow that I've had to develop, which, as you say, is super important, because the beer needs to arrive in the best possible condition.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go back to your early days at 5 Points. Ooh. How did you get your start there? What role were you in? And then take us up to where you are now.
So I started as the sales rep, and I was the 12th employee.
Oh my goodness.
It was a sales team of 2. And so we were already
to cover all of London.
And the UK. We were selling beer all over the UK as well. Obviously our home market of London was our biggest market, and we had hundreds of accounts to look after. So so I was taken on as a sales rep. I was initially, because I was living in West London at the time, I was initially there to try and build up our West presence, because we are an East London brewery.
Quite strong.
Yeah, and Tom, who was the first ever sales manager, he'd built up a big kind of ethos of obviously local, and of course it makes sense to have the people on your doorstep to build that relationship and to have that lovely connection between the brewery and the venues. And then we were expanding. So initially I was kind of really hitting specifically that part of London to drum up new business, but also it became very evident that we were just getting busier and busier as 5 Points. And so account management, which is obviously key, again, it's better to actually look after what you have than to be chasing new all the time. So my role then very quickly developed into a lot of account management and looking after people. Okay. And so I suppose then I was working in London for 2.5 years, and I've now been doing a mixture of an Irish and now an international role for the past 1.5 years now. So been at the brewery 3.5 years, and I was the 12th employee, and I think now we're on 38, 39.
Wow.
And there's been some people who've come and gone, but
growing team.
Yes, it's been amazing. And especially with me being based over here, the amount of times I see messages, we've got a little internal messaging system, and everyone's like, hey, welcome to this new brewer, and I'm like, oh my god,
hi from Dublin.
Yeah. So I go back very regularly, and the first thing I do is make sure I go and visit the brewery and say hi to the new guys and anyone else who's joined. Like, it's really important to meet these people face to face. And I often go, oh, so you're Francesca, and I'm like, oh, yikes.
What have you heard?
Yeah, because I've obviously been there a while. So but it's great to be part of seeing that growth. And I remember actually the day that I got offered the role, which obviously I was ecstatic about, but In particular, I remember one of the phrases that was said to me by Tom, who hired me at the time as my manager. He said, I feel like you've come at a really exciting time for 5 Points. I think like we're really on the brink of this really exciting kind of growth, just not just in terms of size, but in terms of our portfolio of beers, in terms of the people we're bringing to the team, and then you can be part of that. And I was like, I mean, you sold it to me already, but now I cannot wait to get started. And that's what it's been like. It's just been a constant kind of evolution and growth, and it's been nothing but excitement and hard work ever since. So, you know.
Yeah, it seems for both the business and then for you personally as well, you've really developed along with the business as well in terms of the different roles that you've taken on and the opportunities that you've grabbed with both hands.
I did not ever think I was going to be in sales, let's put it that way. Sales wasn't like the dream or whatever, even though everyone says, you know, you can talk anybody into anything.
Yeah.
But, you know, you can only really do it if you believe in the product and believe in the business and stuff. But I definitely wasn't aiming to be a salesperson in a brewery, and I very much fell into it, which is what happens to a lot of people when they fall into their roles.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the skills I had to learn, how to do sales and how to think about, you know, profit and loss and numbers and kind of all that kind of stuff was, so definitely the learning curve was steep. The beer I knew and loved. I knew and loved, but it's been great that opportunity has arisen, and that there's this whole new now skill base and knowledge that I have that I didn't when I just was thinking about drinking beer and not about selling it. So
let's talk about that. What brought you to work in beer? What were you doing before?
Yeah, it was very different. So I've always loved beer. So that's the first thing. I know that some people are like, they come to beer late and then they ignite their passion. But from the get-go, I was always the beer drinker. Everyone was like, you know, ask Francesca, she drinks beer. And it was always exclusively cask. I'm from Norwich, and Norwich is an extremely well-known city for cask. Still debate about whether, you know, it's the capital of cask. Is it Norwich or is it Sheffield? You know, obviously, you know where I sit on that. But we're both great cities. But, you know, I was surrounded by a lot of very nice locally made cask beer. And it just always appealed to my palate. I think I have a propensity more for bitterness, and I just loved the kind of fact that it was local and it was gorgeous. And so beer was just always on my journey. It was always a big hobby. It became more and more of a hobby. I was going to festivals. I ended up getting involved. I was on my local camera committee in Liverpool when I was very young. So I was pretty young compared to a lot of the people on my local camera committee, but I learnt a lot, you know, saw different sides of it, interacted more with landlords and stuff. So that was all fine, but I still just always thought of it as a hobby. So my job, which I also fell into, was youth work. Whilst I was at university, I did a lot of youth work, trying to engage with the local schools around Liverpool where I was studying, trying to sort of demystify university, because a lot of these students that I was working with, their parents didn't go to university, maybe not many people in their school go to university. And my role was to sort of be like, well, if it's something that you want to do, I'm going to try and help you to feel more confident about it and have the knowledge, because there's no getting away from it. There's a bit of not a game, but there's like, you need to have a good grounding of understanding of how to pursue your path that you wish to do to go to university. And some people have that knowledge from their personal circumstances, and some just really don't. Yeah. So that's how I started working in youth work at university. I ended up mentoring, looked after children, and then that just kind of developed, where my first job was in Wigan. I was supporting young people into volunteering as a way to try to build their confidence and to engage with the local community. So that was challenging but really enjoyable. And then I was doing it in Liverpool, and then I got made redundant at 25. And I was like, made redundant at 25?
Like, this wasn't the path I was supposed to be on.
No, I mean, the charity sector I knew was very tumultuous and it's not guaranteed. But yeah, to turn around at 25 and be like, I've been made redundant, I thought that only happened to old people. Okay, right, what am I going to do? And so I had to leave Liverpool because it was a really difficult time for work, and ended up falling back into working in higher education and got a job at University of Hertfordshire, and it was doing a similar thing. So working with kids in the local area, all from sort of, you know, underrepresented backgrounds who wouldn't usually go to university, doing things like getting mentoring programs, support programs, and getting them into the university and meeting people and realising that those kids who are at university now were like you know, they thought they couldn't come.
There's a place for you here.
Exactly. Yeah. So I did that at Hertfordshire, then I did it at Oxford University, that was different, and then I did it at King's College London.
Oh my goodness.
So there was a lot of moving around.
You've always been a saleswoman, I think, maybe more than you know.
Well, I think, my job was to get in a car often and drive all the way to a school and try and talk to kids about university and try and help them and support them. A lot of mentoring, but also, there is a lot of just getting up and talking about a thing, and sometimes you're on a stand and all that kind of stuff. So I really enjoyed it, and it was especially when I moved across to the role at King's College London, it was much more in depth. Like, I was in charge of a programme very targeted specifically that was on a rolling 2-year programme working with sixth formers, and I was in charge of 560 teenagers.
Holy moly.
But like every year, so it accumulated. So the 3 years I was there, I ended up like working with like 1,500.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine.
A lot of names to remember.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like a constant 2-year support program. I had to run summer school to accommodate 200 kids at a time.
Wow.
Mentoring programs. And we did a lot of focus on careers and all that. So very different to what I'm doing now. But it was very rewarding. At 12 years, I was doing youth work and supporting the next generation, as it were.
Yeah.
But I just started to... That was definitely, I didn't stop loving the reward of the job and the challenge of it, but there's a shelf life on that kind of thing. I think it's good when you're young to engage with youth, and I was getting older. But also, working in a university was not where I necessarily saw myself, and I was starting to get a bit bogged down with like the office and office politics, and I thought, what's next? And I was turning 30, and I thought, I don't know why I thought that was a milestone, but I did. I thought, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And I was like, can beer be a job? And then it turns out it can. Yeah. So that's kind of how that happened. And I just decided to pursue it in a bit more of a meaningful way. So, for example, I made friends with someone who, in fact, I used to go to, when I was in London, I used to go to the Rake a lot in Borough Market. I had a big connection with Borough Market. So I got introduced to the owners of the Rake, and I was like, I said at the time, being a brewer is one of my greatest ambitions, because I was really ignorant about what brewing meant. And he just turned around and said, we've got a brewery, it's called Tap East, it's out in Stratford, do you want to come and brew? And I was like, can I? And he said, yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to buy some wellies. Okay, right, cool. Right, let's do this. And yeah, I just took myself off on a Saturday and went and brewed with a guy called Johnny, who now works at Beavertown, and he just put me through the whole process. I did a lot of cleaning, a lot of talking about beer. And it was amazing and it was wonderful, but talk about important, because I just, after the day of that, I was like, I don't want to be a brewer.
Yeah, I've had that same experience.
I think
where
people
I love beer,
do,
but brewing's not for me.
I think it was because Johnny spoke about enzymes for about 45 minutes with so much passion and like just wouldn't stop talking about them, that I just looked at him and went, I'm never going to care about enzymes.
I don't have that thing,
as
whatever
much
that
as you.
is. Yeah.
And he was like, fair enough. And the other significant conversation that came up from Johnny there as well was that, so literally from the age of, I'll say 18, because we're talking about legal drinking age, from the age of 18 up until that point, so 29, I'd exclusively only ever drunk cask.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't necessarily like a whole ethos thing, like I didn't believe that other beer was other beer, but I genuinely did grow up still in the 90s and whatever, where keg equated rubbish. It was like the mass-produced, really tasteless stuff. So I didn't know that you could get good keg.
Tasty keg beer, yeah.
Exactly. I wasn't exposed to, for example, amazing European beers.
Yeah.
You don't even have to talk about British beers. Even just, more commonly, there was very good stuff on keg if you went to the right place. And I was kind of like, also I was a big anti-fizz anyway. As a kid, I never drank pop, I never drank cola or lemonade. I would refuse a glass of champagne at a wedding, so I was like, it's too fizzy, I don't like it.
Where's the cask beer?
Yeah. I need to have something, a little delicate palate of no effervescence for me, please. And so I just turned around and I also said that to Johnny, and he paused and he went, fair enough. And then he just paused and went, that's a shame, because there's a hell of a lot of good beer that you're missing out on. So after that experience, which was like Christmas time, I made a New Year's resolution, which I never do, but my New Year's resolution was to have a career in beer by the end of the year. And this is
you made it happen.
Yeah, this is my little mantra, was like a career in beer by the end of the year. And that involves starting to drink keg. And I had a very burpy January where I was adjusting to the new bubbles, but I pretty soon got on board with it.
You made it through, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a lot of work to carried on, obviously, my full-time role, to go to every event that I could possibly think of, get myself in front of people, talk to them, and specifically say, what do you do and how did you do what you do?
Yeah.
Especially women, because it is always, obviously I've been listening to a lot of these previous podcasts and the conversations about women in beer and that whole, you need to see to be thing. I loved that. I hadn't actually I know Melissa and she helped me a lot in the beginning, but I never heard her say that. But in particular, I was like, looking at a woman, especially a young woman like myself, and saying, how did you do what you do? And I met some wonderful people who were very helpful. But also I just started working on top of my full-time job. So I worked at the Beer Boutique, which unfortunately is no longer around. I was very sad to learn that this year. It was a shop that I went into, and there was a wasteland of options in West London at the time. I was living in West London at the time, and there was so little options for good beer, and I was like, I'm just starting to learn about beer, and now I can't get my hands on any. This isn't fair.
Darn, I'm in the wrong side of town.
Yeah, and then discovered the Beer Boutique in Putney, and walked in, and I was like, what are all these Belgian things? What's this? And as from anyone saying, ask Francesca anything about beer, I was like, but I know nothing about this beer. And seeing things like cans, I was like, canned beer? what? This is weird. Like, honestly, it blew my mind. And so they were big on American beers in that shop as well. And they had things like Rogue, never heard of it. They had Flying Dog, they had Oscar Blues. And I was like, this is just, I don't even understand all of this. And
what is happening here?
Yeah, and I was like, I could see myself gravitating towards all the bitters and the milds and all the kind of stuff that I knew. And they were like, no, try this. And I just so happened to walk in there one day and say, oh, you know, I was actually looking for some advice. I'm thinking about getting into beer. And he said, oh, well, you've picked a good time to come in because it's my last week. And I was like, no. And he said, well, why don't you start working here? You obviously know about beer.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
That was that. And so my Friday nights, Saturdays, and sometimes Sundays as well was spent working in the beer boutique and having a very steep learning curve. Yeah. Which was wonderful.
It's being willing to throw yourself in there at the deep end, be a little bit unsure of yourself, but know that that's when you're going to learn the most. But also to do it on top of a full-time job as well, and really know that this is the transition you wanted to make.
I loved it. Yeah, it was exactly. You know how it is. It's kind of that. Yeah, of course, it's hard work and scary, especially when people would come in and ask me for a lager recommendation. I was like, I literally have never drunk lager in my life.
What is that stuff?
Like, true, up until that point, I just had never had lager. I didn't think it was a legit beer. Apologies for my ignorance. I was like, I'd just look at my colleague Alfie and I'd say, they're asking about lager, Alfie. Like,
this one's for you.
And I'd listen to what he'd say, you know, and learn a lot. And I learned so much from the customers as well, because I'd say, why do you come in and have that beer every week? You know, there's a guy who literally would come in and buy 8 Augustina Hellers, and he would always say, make sure next time it's in that you've always got 8 for me. Always ordered 8. And I was like, why? What is it about that beer? And I learned a lot. Yeah, it was kind of like, I've got to, if I'm going to get into this beer thing, I've got to legitimize like who I am. I've got to give people a reason to take a shot on me and employ me, because even though, of course, I can bring transferable skills, looking after 560 kids involves quite a lot of organisation and quite a lot of foresight. And I'm obviously quite happy to get up and talk in front of people, because if you can talk in front of teenagers, you can talk in front of anyone. So all that was fine. But geez, I really realised that there was so much more that I needed to know about beer, and you've got to throw yourself in and working at the coalface, as it were. You can learn a lot by drinking and reading, but working in a bottle shop, talk about a amazing apprenticeship.
Yeah, seeing all these different brands come in all the time, different styles coming in all the time, different packaging come in all the time. Yeah, it's a great way to learn. And
I was only there for... how long was it? Probably about 10 months, because then luckily the full-time role. But even in that 10-month period as well, the change I saw from, I said I walked in and saw cans. What are these little cans? What are these little cans? We went from having a shelf of cans to having like 3 full fridges. Yeah. And just to see the change in people's buying behaviour made me also realise that there was this whole thing that probably I had missed out on, because I was still just sitting and having cask ale in pubs, which is still wonderful, and I'm still a big advocate for it, and I actually miss it a lot living in Ireland, has to be said. But I just had totally, this whole thing had bypassed me. So actually I had a lot of catching up to do, and it was...
Suddenly you're on the front line and seeing it all change.
Yes, really, which was great, which was amazing. Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about those transferable skills that you brought with you. And then we'll talk about your beer expertise, as you then went to pursue your beer sommelier to really get stuck into beer.
Sure, okay. Well, I mean, I think it was really good... to anyway have outside perspective on something is important. So I remembered specifically, I was grilled quite hard in my interviews as well. 2 interviews I had for 5 points. I'd never had 2 interviews before. But it's because Ed is very keen on making sure that he meets everybody. And I was grilled quite heavily on, why are you doing this, basically? You seem to have had a very rewarding job, and it seems like it's quite secure at a university and all this kind of stuff, and it just seems like a bit of a leap, especially with are you going to feel as rewarded, I think was a big question on his mind. And I said, I've given a lot of my life to supporting the young people and stuff, and but I want to do this. And then the thing that's transferable, I know this is something that is also just down to personality as well, but I had dedicated a lot of my career to trying to help people. And one of the big things that really specifically drew me to 5 Points, after the fact that I loved the beers, was that they have a really important ethos about the community, and being the first UK living wage accredited brewery really appealed to me. And the fact that they had set up apprenticeships when there weren't any locally, and that they were taking on an apprentice each year. And so for me, I feel like what I could bring was that kind of, from an ethos level, I felt like we shared the same aims, but also because I'd worked in that kind of environment where you can apply those to what you do. So it becomes part of kind of what you do each day should also have the aim in mind of making fantastic beer, for sure, but also being in keeping with, let's think about the community, let's think about supporting, as I say, the next generation, so doing things like taking on an apprentice. So I feel like that's where that meshed, and that's where I kind of slipped in very easily with the kind of day-to-day working and all of that. One of the steep learning curves for me was that I'd gone from, very kind of professional working environment where, you dress a certain way and you behave in certain ways in the office, and everything was like very chilled and relaxed at 5 Points. Like everyone was working a million miles an hour, but the attitude kind of was very much like, we'll have music on and, we're kind of 4:30 on a Friday, maybe we should crack open a couple of beers. And that made me slip in straight away. I loved that kind of approach, but to begin with, I was still probably being very...
You're the office self.
And also when you work with kids, you particularly have to be very...
Clean up your act. Yeah.
You have to clean up your act, exactly. So that was something that was really good for me and what I learned, but what I could bring, and I was specifically even told, like after the interview, once I've been offered it, they said, we need you to come in here and tell us what you see needs basically to be improved.
Oh, that's great. So they're asking for that outside perspective.
Give us that feedback. We've done a very steep growth. We've gone from 2.5 people when we started in 2013 to now, when I joined in early 2016, 12, and they felt like, that was, whoa, we've got 3 times as many people as we had before. And, obviously I was never going to be able to come in and say anything about the brewing techniques. But in the office side of things, for example, there was a lot that I could say, well, have you thought about, approaching this in this way? It was actually quite a lot of very just fundamental things about tools that you can use in the office, approaches that you can use to just make things quicker. Because as I say, when you're looking after 560 teenagers and you have to deal with all their paperwork and all their stats and all their knowledge and all that kind of making sure they're all being looked after, you need to find as streamlined a process as possible. You need to be able to cut out as many kind of slower steps without losing the personal touch. And actually that was a big thing. So I was very keen on trying to make sure that we could still send really personalized emails and communications to people, but I think there's tools we can use to do that in a faster way. Exactly. And then also just perspectives on things like, okay, so the orientation when you come to 5 Points, like everyone was like, I had loads of stuff that I had when I first arrived. There was like health and safety talks, there was obviously everyone going through the sales process, but there was then I kind of turned around and said, well, have you thought about doing it this way? And they were like, oh, we haven't. And I was like, I think that might save you a bit of time. And so it was kind of, I think there was that, and I loved that honesty from the start, because I would always say I'm very honest, but I'm very fair, and I'm also quite solutions focused. So I think that was quite welcomed as well. That, as I say, I've literally walked into a room with 100 teenagers in a room that I've booked with a whole session planned, and someone else is in the room and the academic hasn't turned up, and then you've got 100 stroppy teenagers who are obviously miffed that you've got to try and do something and entertain them with, and you have to think on your feet. So I think as well I was quite good at when a problem happened, whether it was a customer that was being difficult or whether it's something didn't get delivered on time or whatever. I think I was quite good at fighting those fires and working with the team through kind of logistical, thoughtful kind of situations, whilst always maintaining the great persona, because you can't drop that face when you've got those teenagers in front of you. And it's the same with your customers. It's really important to... We're very well known for our customer service in 5 Points, and that appealed to me, and I felt like I could bring something to that, because if you make a mistake, people always forget it if you deal with it well. Yeah. And 5 Points was really good at dealing with it, but I think I kind of was able to add to that in terms of once we started scaling up, how you could still maintain that.
Yeah, that personal connection.
Exactly. Yeah, so it was good, and I think as well the fact that I've been able to adapt. Yeah, I've scared and sort of everyone always feels like out of their depth when you change role, but I feel much more comfortable having adapted across to doing the Ireland account manager and then now overseas, because of how much flex and change I'd had in my previous job. Because when you do work in education and charities, as was demonstrated by just losing my job because the funding had gone, you have to adapt very quickly to new skills and new roles, because it's a very tumultuous kind of environment. And 5 Points has been steady, but we've been evolving, and so it's been good grounding for that kind of change, managing change.
Just to be ready for whatever comes your way.
Exactly, yeah.
So the bit, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'm so interested in the idea that you sort of had this bold move to come into Ed and say, look, I'm moving to Dublin. Can I bring the job with me? What did you do to prepare for that, or to convince him that this was the right thing to do? Because we know not every business would be able to accommodate something like that. But you have proven yourself in your last few years at 5 Points. But what did you do to prepare?
So I think the main thing was, again, I was just very frank and upfront. To be honest, Ed was the third person I told about. I literally told my parents, my very best couple of friends, and then I was like, I'm not telling anybody else until I tell Ed.
Gotta go to work.
Because I want to have a really frank and honest conversation with him. And it was the whole kind of, I'm not leaving because I want to leave the job. I mean, I want to do this new opportunity in Dublin, this new life experience, and support my partner, and it's an opportunity we can't turn down. But I went in prepared to say I don't want to leave, because I just, 2 years, I'd done the whole career in beer. By the end of the year, I was living the dream. I was, and obviously much more knowledgeable and more confident. I'd like to think getting into my groove. So I think I mentioned it earlier, but one of the big things I did was there was a lot of research into the stats around what was happening in Ireland and what was happening over here. And whilst it's a much smaller market, it's just a smaller country, full stop, it's a much smaller market, there had been growth. And there was also the fact that you could look over the sea and see that there was lots of new exciting breweries that were maybe in their 3rd or 4th year of production, so things were kind of trundling on nicely. So yeah, I just picked up the phone with certain people. I spoke with Judith Boyle. Some people might know her because she's definitely come over to the UK to do judging and things like that. But she's got a wonderful perspective because she has a scientific background herself. She actually lectures at the local college on hospitality and bar management and all that kind of side of things. But also her family business is a pub with a bottle shop attached to it. So she was exceptionally useful to talk to, because I figured I've got to understand both sides of the business, because it's off-trade and on-trade, it's bottle shops and off-licenses, and then it's pubs, because as we all know, they're two different beasts. And what was very evident and was going to be a big challenge, and still remains a challenge, not just for international breweries, but local ones as well, is that the off-trade is difficult the on-trade is difficult because even though we don't have... So in the UK, we have the challenge of tied pubs, where maybe the access to the bar is very tough if you're small. Here in Ireland, we have lots of independents in the pubs, but then there's a big domination of two big multinational companies. So to get on that bar is quite difficult, and to maintain your place on that bar. So talking to someone like her and getting that perspective about the changes that are happening currently in the scene, and I think that's what I was noticing, was there was a change, there was a shift in the approach in Ireland, that people wanted to see this craft beer. They were happy to drink things from things like Americans like Sierra Nevada and stuff were starting to be seen and known and recognised here. Lagunitas was another one that you could see quite well. And so I felt that this was a key time, because Irish people were, and therefore the whole industry was opening up more to being receptive to different styles of beer, and both local and international. They were kind of willing for that. So I did a lot of talking to people like Judith and getting a lot of insight. She also gave me loads of insight about the off-license trade, which is very independent, operates quite independently here. I also the way I proposed it as well to Ed was like, should we just give it a go and see? Because I didn't know whether it would work or not. Yeah. And I think the thing that was unique was that I was going to be boots on the ground here. And as I said before, like, it's a brewery the size of 5 Points was never going to be able to just ping off loads of brand ambassadors all over the world. We're not that size at all. But the fact that I was coming anyway, like I was like, look, I'm going anyway, it's happening. Yeah. But I really want to still work for 5 Points. And Ed said, well, we really want you to stay as well. And the fact that I said we can make this potentially work, if it's the fact that with me being there, I'm going to get to know about the industry much faster. I can put a face to this brand new brand that I'm sure I know for a fact we were not that well known here at all. Like, we didn't have as well known a presence as maybe some other craft breweries, because we've not been going as long, and some other breweries have been operating much more internationally anyway. So we weren't a name that, unless you were a real beer geek, that people had necessarily come across. There was a lot of me building that up as well, and building those relationships. And I just said to him, this is quite a unique, opportunity for us to do that, because, as I say, we wouldn't just be able to send people out. I said, give me 6 months, just looking after Ireland. He tried to nudge in a few other countries. I said, let me just do Ireland. Yeah, I said, because I'd rather do it well, and we'll see whether it works. And it went really well. We did doing things like collaboration brews, pouring at festivals. It wasn't just selling, because all these things go hand in hand. And I said, let's sit down and look at it afterwards. And we did. And then we agreed that it's gone well, but it's probably not enough for one person to do. And we both agreed that. Okay. We were like, this market is not big enough for that. It's a good market, it's a solid market, and I think it can trundle along steadily, nicely. And I've really firmed us up in terms of being known in the industry. And everyone sort of knows I'm 5 Points in Ireland. I'm always branded up everywhere I go. So there's you again. There's always a pentagon to be seen somewhere. But so then that's why the role then developed into the overseas. And I think I always had an eye on that. I was kind of always looking at trends, looking at what was happening elsewhere, also talking to lots of Irish people who themselves do a lot of exporting. That's big. Exporting is quite a big thing here because the market's small. And it's been just some very knowledgeable people who've been able to help me with that information and seeing how they've done it. So there was a lot of my eye on that anyway, but also from coming over and working with a boots on the ground approach, it's taught me a lot about how I would like to approach markets with the export manager role, with the overseas manager role. Yeah, yes, I can't go and live everywhere, but there's so much more I can do. I feel like I can condense what I've done here quite time effectively in other ways. And that kind of experience I think was invaluable, and I think Ed saw that, I saw that. It was a mutual thing of neither of us wanting to leave each other. So we just had a long distance relationship. That's basically what we established.
Well, I think it's really incredible to just show when you can contribute to a business, you do your research, you make an impact that they want to keep you and allow you to continue serving that business and making a difference. So it's a really cool story for, you know, someone being relatively new to beer and making that commitment. I need to get into beer by the end of this year to then see where you've gone in your trajectory. It's, I think, a nice example for other people to be able to see, oh yeah, if I want to do that, I can do that. By doing the research, talking to the right people, not being afraid to reach out, throw yourself into the deep end. So yeah, well done. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you've got so much further to go.
I hope so, yeah. This is a brand new challenge that I was not expecting. And it's still all working for the same company that I love and the same beers and working in that same world that I love. But there is a whole load of stuff now that I'm learning about that to do with exporting, customs, excise, paperwork and stuff, which I didn't know. And so it's just one of those wonderful little shifts where who knows where it's going to...
Something new to learn.
Exactly, and who knows where it may lead to next.
Yeah.
So.
Tell me a bit about how you found your beer community here in Ireland. As you had the whole network and the 5 Points family in London, so coming to a new sort of industry over here. Yeah,
that was a big thing actually, because I really had established a lot of connections in London and the fact that, you know, I love the fact that you could walk in somewhere and people go, oh, I know 5 Points. Yeah. Or you might, the thing that I think everyone loves is when you are just in a bar and you overhear someone ordering the beer and they have no idea you work for the brewery. Like, that always gives me a wonderful feeling. Yes, I love that. Little win. Yeah, and that was a big adjustment to come over here because most people are like, I've never heard of you. Like, and I was like, that's fine. And then you just kind of like, they're like,
I'm ready to make the intro. What
exactly.
Do you want to know?
Yeah, come on, let's do this. So I did exactly what I pretty much had done when I was trying to get into beer, which was just to reach out to people.
To everybody.
Yeah. So there was, for example, she's like excellent friend of mine now, both with beer and just in life in general. But there's a great couple here called Wayne and Janice Dunn, and they're known, their kind of moniker is the Irish beer snobs, which was always...
Definitely seen them on social media.
Yes, which was, I think, always meant to be, obviously was meant to be tongue-in-cheek, and sometimes I do think Wayne and Jan regret calling themselves the snobs, because we just call them the snobs now. And they're just like, we're more than just the snobs. But, for example, Jan and I had been following each other on Twitter for about 2 years, but never interacted. And I was like, I'm just going to cold contact her. So I just messaged her on Twitter, and I said, hi, I'm moving to this place and I don't know anybody, and yes, if it's beer related, that's great, but also I just want to
hang out.
Do you want to hang out and go for a pint? Like, even if we don't end up working together, because they don't work in the industry, they're just amazingly knowledgeable and very enthusiastic enthusiasts, who everyone knows them because they've cultivated a good network. So I hadn't appreciated how good their network was when I was contacting Janice directly. I just thought it was going to be like a nice face to meet when I arrived. Yeah. And actually, Alex and I, so my boyfriend is Alex, we both said, wouldn't it be funny if we had a arrival party? Because we had a leaving party, why don't we just have an arrival party?
Have everybody welcome you here.
Yeah,
that's
and
amazing.
He's like, how are we going to do that? We don't know anybody.
Who do we know?
And I was like, I'll ask a few people and then I'll just put it out there and see what happens. And Jan was a big part of that, where she just managed to get like 20 brewing people in a room, and there was like, this guy works here, this guy works there, he's a sommelier, he's whatever.
That's amazing.
And so that kind of, that tiny little kind of approach of just contacting a couple of people grew into when they introduce you to someone else and then they introduce you. And it's, of course, with my job, it was great. You know, I had my distributor, Four Corners, who were able to take me. I shadowed them to start with. They took me around, introduced their reps, introduced me to kind of key accounts. And it's just this ripple effect that happens where, you know, have you met so-and-so? Have you met so-and-so? Of course, going to beer festivals and stuff, you always meet people, but I was very kind of like, I'm going to walk over and meet you, which is what I had done trying to get into beer at London Brewers Market. I was like, I need to meet you because you do what I think I want to do. So it's just, it's a great community, as we everyone who works in the beer community talks about. Despite there's always frustrations and everything, the main thing is the community of how supportive it is. There were some people who were like, you know, oh, it's an international brewery, you know, we're just trying to build up our own brewing industry and all of that kind of thing. And I was like, and I absolutely want you to do that, and I actually want to support the local beer community. So if there's a local thing that I can get involved in, even if it's just as Francesca, not as 5 Points, I want to do that. I've also been willing to share information and advice about what we've done as a brewery. You know, like there's a couple of people where I've got a really good relationship with the guys up in Lochgill and Sligo. James and I just get on really well, and we brewed a beer together last year, and which was our gin goza, and I hate gin and I hate goza, and I loved that beer.
Oh, so that sounds really interesting.
It was a conversion tactic. It was amazing. But that grew from just then collaborating on an actual beer to we just exchanged a lot of knowledge and information about, because we're both trying to do a bit of exporting, and we've been really helpful to each other and reciprocal, and making introductions is the big thing, isn't it? When someone can introduce you to someone with a face, as opposed to, cold contacting is good, but it can be much richer when someone's like, this is my friend Francesca,
So.
I've met her, she works at 5 Points, she's thinking of doing this, would you like to have a chat with her? And and then I can reciprocate, because obviously I was able to bring in a lot of knowledge and information from the UK. Actually, to be honest, it was very much a two-way thing. Lots of people like, how's it going in London?
Like over there?
What's happening in London versus the rest of the country? So, and also we're that little bit further along. 5 Points turned 6 this year, and so a lot of the breweries here are 1, 2, 3 years in. So the community was very much built up around introductions and ripple effects and just being a bit bolshy and talking to people. And Irish people are quite happy to talk, so I fit in fairly well here.
Right?
But also they were they were as interested in what was happening from my perspective and my experience back home as I was to find out what was happening here. So it's worked well.
Well, it would be a good time to go into my last question, which is what I ask of everyone. But before we go, I want to ask you about your beer sommelier certification, as I know that was a big thing for you to pursue. So why was that of interest, and how has it helped in your day-to-day role?
That's a good one. So basically, while I was also trying to get experience to prove that you should hire me when I want to get a full career in beer, and I really am dedicated to this. I also worked at Wildcard, but we don't even have time to go into that. But I did stuff at Wildcard. I was like, also I need to educate myself, because I come from working in education, so of course I see the power of education, and it's always been on my radar that it's important to have the relevant qualification for what you want to do. My whole job for ages was to try and explain to young people that if you want to do this,
why you need that certification,
you need that
degree.
And how people respect it and view it, and how actually and in every job I'd ever gone to work at university, I had to have a degree and all that kind of stuff. So I and of course I got youth work qualifications and knowledge as well, which was important. So of course I didn't even think about it, but I was like, of course it makes sense to be educated about this.
In my new industry.
So I put myself through the foundation, the advanced, and the how to judge beer, and I got all of those whilst I was still thinking about and applying for jobs, and it was then cracking to be able to put that on the CV, add that on, like I've actually done this, put myself through it. And then when I arrived, I think probably within a week, I said to Ed, so I've done 3 things leading up to beer sommelier. I'd love to be one. I think it'd be really helpful, especially because I am so new to some of these other styles that for years I haven't got to know.
Good point.
I think it'd be really good for the brewery to have a sommelier, and would you be willing to support me? And it was like, no doubt. He's like, yeah, like we'll give you the time that you need to study. I mean, I did vast majority in my own time, but there was things where I was able to engage with other people, like contacts that I'd made through the brewery and outside of beer as well, like foodie people, and because of course that's a big part of sommelier. And so it fell in a particularly full-on time for me, because I was just found out I was moving to Dublin, and then I didn't know for sure I was going to be able to stay at 5 Points. It was still in the mix, and then we were going to have to move to a new country, and I'd also booked my sommelier right in the middle of that. So it was intense, but I did a lot of portfolio building, which I really enjoyed, building the portfolio, and I did just a lot of constantly blind tasting and trying to distinguish between especially things like lagers that I was so new to, and then getting huge amounts of support and help from the likes of yourself, Nats, because you were wonderful. Like, you were the last person I remember. It was like a few days before my actual exam.
Yeah, we did a practice round, some blind tasting.
We did, and you came with Cicerone notes, and I was like, oh, God, this girl, like, she's good. Like, I picked the good person to do this with, and you were like generous with your time, and we sat in Mother Kelly's and we did some blind tastings, and I talked a lot about beer, just getting in the habit of talking about it. Jane Pennington was incredible. She literally came to my house, and we sat. And she sent a box of beer, and she said to my fella Alex, like, you have to receive the delivery box.
She can't know what's in it.
She can't know what's in it.
Yep.
I went up to Leeds, and Annabelle Smith helped me. Rod Jones and Sarah Hyder at Meantime were phenomenal with their knowledge and generous with their time. It was just an incredible amount of support I got from everybody, and I did it because I wanted to finish off the process of, I could have stopped at how to judge beer and all that, because I'd learned a heap amount then, but I just thought it was important to finish the process and to have something that was accredited, that was not easy to get, and it's not everyone has it. To be honest, there is that lovely buzz from being part of a special club and being able to say it. I also get a real buzz out of telling people that I'm a beer sommelier, because the second I do that, they're like, what do you mean there's a sommelier for beer?
Yeah.
And it's all part of that loving beer and being an ambassador so much that even just telling people that, I mean, I don't tell everyone because I'm trying not to brag all the time.
You don't wear your badge all the time, no.
I do, I have it in my little box still. But when it comes up, and I met a wine sommelier recently, and I said, well, I'm a beer sommelier. And they was like, can you be a beer sommelier? And then that just opens the whole conversation about why beer should be elevated and treated and respected the same as wine. And I think that was I didn't expect that as an outcome of being a beer sommelier. I don't think I'd appreciated how much that the act of being one itself would make people question the quality of beer, but it certainly was just from a joy and love of doing it that I thought, I've got to do this. And when Alex like leant over and shook my hand and said, you are a beer sommelier, I mean, it was like getting a degree. I thought like there was the same, because I put so much work into it, and it's not that you stop learning, there's still loads about beer that I need to learn, but it was such an acknowledgement of all that hard work and care and love and attention. And you know, I recommend anyone to do it. It does, and do what I did, which is to seek support from people, because and I've done that already. I've lots of people that I know are doing it, and I've sent them my portfolio and said, this is how I did it, you do it your way. But I think that intimidates a lot of people, the portfolio, but I actually love doing it, because like I just love it's also the coursework kind of thing. But just reach out to people. No one says no. Yeah. Like no one says no.
We all want more people to join our beer
community.
community.
It's such a supportive group, so definitely just go and do it, people. It's great.
All right, well, there we go. Now we can get into the last question, which is the question I ask everyone. What do you enjoy most about being a part of the beer industry?
It's going to be the same answer as most people, which 100% is the people.
Yeah, you can hear it throughout everything you've said today. You know, you seem to reach out more than more people I know, at least, or maybe you're more willing to talk about it. But you have just spoken to so many people to get to where you are now. Yeah,
I didn't used to be like that. I used to be very like I've always been chatty and confident. Everyone will tell you that. But I was less likely to reach out, and for fear of no response, and therefore seeing it as a rejection, or for fear of feeling like you're annoying someone or using up their time. Or I used to not be able to walk into a pub on my own. I used to wait outside until the person I was meeting was there. And it's, you know, so actually what I was so overwhelmed by how well my often completely unwarranted requests or out of the blue requests were to people, either, like I say, cold contacting them. I'd read articles about people and then just try and find their Twitter handle and contact them. All that kind of stuff. The overwhelming response of, I can help you, I'll support you. Did you know that there's the Crafty Beer Girls group in London? At the very least, start going along to that and chat about beer and meet women in beer, and also make new friends in London, because I was new to London as well. All that kind of stuff. The way that was received so well, I think just by them, just also shows how generous people are and are willing to share, and solidified for me that it was the right move to work in beer, because it was a big thing for me, not ethically, that sounds a bit OTT, but definitely ethos-wise, to having spent my whole life wanting to work in charity and education, to move to private sector. I'd never worked in private sector apart from bar jobs before. So it was the fact that in my journey to get there, that people were so receptive and supportive and helpful and not judgmental at all, which was really important, that I thought, this is the right place for me. And I think the other thing that I was thinking about this question, because I knew it was coming, the other thing I would just say that is very specific for me is that I've always worked in places where there's no actual thing that you make. I'm not a practical, tangible person. I've always done, like I did a history degree, and I like talking about beer, and I love obviously like running workshops with kids and seeing their faces, which you can't say look at their face at the end of it. Like you don't, unless you take a picture of it, I suppose, and show it to someone. But the idea that I now work in this industry where you've got designers creating beautiful artwork, like our designer Kate, just produces this beautiful thing that is there forever. It is the label. The fact that we've got, obviously, the brewers, they make a thing that, I mean, it's not there forever because hopefully you drink it, but the fact that you've got this thing that people can actually consume and turn around and say, I love that product, I love that thing, it's been really good for me. And I love that because it's made me feel a bit more connected to a whole life and side of things that I've always just been kind of in the professional services, doing presentations, talking to people, getting lovely squishy feelings, but never actually having anything
tangible.
Exactly. And practical, and being with very creative people who apply that creativity, whether it's in their brewing of the beer or the production of the label or the marketing of the beer, their wonderful content on social media. To be surrounded by all those people is incredible. And I think it's also made me much more appreciative of things, because it takes a lot of effort to make things.
To make a thing.
And for it to be the same every time, or to be liked and received well, or to stand out on the shelf. wow, it's just very inspiring. So I love now being in an industry. I work for a manufacturing industry essentially, and that's quite, we talk about all the sexy cool stuff around it, but I work for a manufacturing industry, and that's really cool.
Yeah,
I like that a lot. So
and then it just gives you so much more pride to then go out and have other people drink this thing, because you know how it's made and who made it, and all the effort that went into it.
I love it. It's great, as you can probably tell.
Yeah, duh. I think I got that. Oh, well, thank you so much for your time. I'm excited to drink some more of this Brookfield Brown.
Of course, thank you, Nat. It's been wonderful. It's been a real honour, and let's enjoy the rest of Dublin.
Yes, let's go see the city.
Amazing. Sláinte.
Cheers. Thanks again for hosting me and for being such a great tour guide, Francesca. Listeners, if you need any tips on the Dublin beer scene, you know who to ask. Next week, you'll hear from beer sommelier Annabelle Smith on what it's like to be a professional beer taster. You don't want to miss it. Chat soon.